These things always are there, and so these are part of the engineering challenges. Anytime you have a delay where, let's say in the network, the echo's always there, but if it comes back at the same time when you're talking, you think it's yourself, so you don't mind it. But if it comes back a half a second later, then it's a problem. So there's always challenges like that. 4G, interestingly enough, minimizes the network latency quite a bit, such that, and this is probably one of the issues for a carrier, is Skype may sound pretty good over 4G, as opposed to 3G right now. That's why it could pose as a threat. So this might actually stimulate the carriers to embrace newer services. Question. Yeah, there's like a 200 millisecond latency right now, let's say on HSPA. That might become 5 milliseconds in LTE. So, okay, so TRFO means no codec changes, the handsets negotiate, and then you even can minimize even further with TFO, tandem-free operation, and just go end-to-end. So, there are ways to even do that on 3G. They are experienced? Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the network itself, there is, if there is a 200 millisecond round trip delay, well, guess what? 200 milliseconds is the magic number where echo becomes noticeable. There are tricks, however. One of the tricks is you create like an HOV lane, you prioritize certain packets over everything else, and then you can minimize, but you can't do that for every packet. Then this brings up this whole net neutrality debate. Can you distinguish one packet over another? And so we haven't had that debate yet, but I believe it's entering Congress again, and so we'll see how that plays out. I think there was a question here.
Yes, so how do carriers protect themselves? I mean, obviously there's going to be all of these third-party application developers out there developing soft phones that can run well, and even better and better as, with 4G and with data capability becoming better and better, and latency's going down, and what's to stop these third parties from eating into the high margin business, where your customer's spending 30 cents a minute right now calling overseas? What's to stop them paying 2 cents a minute through a soft phone provider that they've downloaded from the App Store? I mean,
well, there's a couple ways. You could disable it, like Google Voice on the iPhone. You could.
But how long will that last?
Yeah. Somebody will enable it, but
that's the high margin business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the
86% is what Mehmet indicated.
Yeah, you're charging someone 30 cents a minute for a call that's costing you,
3 cents.
Yeah, less.
So the operator's got to look at the cost of doing the same service, right? Delivering that international call. Are they transcoding a couple times? Are they going to circuit switched? Are they throwing it back into PSTN and high cost to operate switches? And then they need to look at can they compete maybe on a more level ground by an IP oriented service and possibly deliver that call just as cheaply, but hey, without having to dial a prefix or fire up an app, and it's just now it's a bearable international rate on your mobile device, right?
Exactly, or the operator gives you a better user experience. Maybe it's video now and they charge you 30 cents for that video session.
Yeah.
Or it's unified communications with collaboration, and push to talk becomes push to video share, push to document share, push to collaborate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're going to add value, otherwise you risk cannibalizing your existing revenue. I mean, if you come out with your own IP service and it's substantially more cost effective, then people will go to the trouble, I think.
Of course.
Getting an extra few buttons to save 28 cents a minute. I don't know.
Video has been brought up a number of times today, but the U.S. still doesn't have video calling on the 3G network. I think it will take off with the U.S. carrier operators.
Not sure how much I could say about
Well, not immediately. I don't think that's the driver for 4G. To tell you the truth, that's what we
It's not
talk.
a driver, but it will.
Yeah.
Well, there are technical challenges there, right? And some of those are, the same technical challenges on that 4G network exist on the 3G IP network, and you want to have all those points call all the other points, right? And I think there's some there's hesitance for the operator to put a lot of marketing muscle into a service that if everybody, 80 million people took it up, and everybody wanted to use it or have it available, can they technically deliver it? And so I think, there's some technical challenges, but there's no doubt there's demand out there. So.
Yeah, in fact, we have the same thing that we had in VoIP back in the 2000, 2001 timeframe. Yeah. You have all these codec differences in video. You have signaling standards.
But they've overcome that in the rest of the world, just not in the United States.
Yeah. Well, and here we also have a debate. Do you use the spectrum that the carriers are using, or do you go with a media flow or a DVB-H as they're doing in Europe? So there's still some debates out there right now.
And it's also a costly requirement, because connecting these disparate networks is there's a new architecture. Transcoding is becoming popular. So how to mix and match and communicate these different modems, and video is going to add another kind of dimension to it. There are a couple of actually leading carriers very interested in that. So we've been working on a lab system already, to provide video and the transcoding kind of integrated solution. It's not publicly announced yet, but it's genuine interest from leading carriers on this. I mean, I would say, you may hear something in the next Mobile World Congress. It's maybe sooner in February, like that.
Plus, there's a difference in video. Is it user-generated? Is it the video, like video telephony, or is it the broadcast video that comes from?
Yeah, it's IP video or SIP-based video that can be transcoded through to 324M or something.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other questions? How are we doing for time? What's that?
3 bucks.
Lots of time. Okay. Oh, there's a question back there.
No.
Call one person quickly, or call? Well, yeah. So I mean, I think people, if some additional services were easier to use, I think people would do it. But they're going to be cost driven, right? And so if that 4G network, if the incremental cost, it goes back to the incremental cost of delivering voice over that 4G network. It's not the cost of delivering 4G. It's not necessarily going to be less, but the incremental cost of delivering voice over that 4G makes it lower cost to that type of user. I'm sure it's they're going to head that way on their X phone, right?
I would agree with that. If it's just voice, I mean, there's cheaper ways to do voice, and just leave the network alone.
Yeah.
But if this device becomes a heart monitor, some other type of monitor, and there's a doctor at the other end who's, let's say, the person's elderly and needs some surveillance, then that's a whole different paradigm. And maybe that's another managed service that comes out. Otherwise, again, why do you need multi megabit per second pipes to a phone? If it's just 64 kilobit voice and that's wireline toll quality voice, you could compress it down to 5 kilobits and get reasonably good voice. And so why do you need 5 meg? It doesn't make any sense. So there has to be a business case driver behind this, which brings up a whole other debate. Is there a business case for LTE?
Is there a business case for LTE?
If you're going to spend, let's say,
demand, there's people who will pay the price.
Well, would you pay an extra $100 a month in addition to what you're paying right now for 4G?
I don't think it'll be an extra $100, but yeah, I mean, we're probably not your typical user. But.
Well, if there are new applications gone along with it, certainly there will be, some, to pay that extra premium. But I don't think that it will be that type of a premium, personally. And it also, how are you going to deliver this integrated IP? Eventually, you have to get there. I mean, that's, like the gentleman said, 75% of the population uses just for voice only. That's why in some of the countries, the migration to IMS or LT is not going to be that fast. I mean, we are deploying last couple of years in China. We are one of the leading suppliers for China Mobile and China Telecom. Biggest carriers in the world, and they are on 2G. And they are happily ever after because they never had a service before.
I wouldn't say happily ever after. I mean, they're aggressively pursuing IMS.
But remember, the Apple iPhone just came out just a couple of years ago, and originally it was a 2G phone, right?
Yep.
And people were lining up for that.
Yeah, it's true. It's an experience. So.
Following to what you were just saying, I guess switching from 2G to a 3G network, the operators were not able to differentiate between the voice service. Pretty much everyone sounded the same. Now, coming to the 4G, of course, you're talking about the backhaul. Where do you see that differentiation now coming into the operators? To me, they all kind of sound the same, pretty much offering the same kind of call services. How would you, I guess that was the question that you brought up. Where is the business with those services?
Ever since I had a conference call about wideband codecs, I've noticed, it's a little harder to understand people on my darn cell phone. And, maybe it could be getting older in my ears or something, but I think I think once, what I'm told is once everybody starts to experience that wideband codec, I think there'll be a driver there, and so you'll find a lot more people jumping because now, hey, you've got 4G, I've got 4G, hey, you sound crystal clear, you sound really good. But if you call back to 2G, 3G, and not to say certainly you can deliver wideband over 3G, and it depends upon your access technology how easy it is to do that. But it may be a big driver.
More of a differentiation between operators because if it is a wideband, then everybody offers wideband. In fact, it's pretty much half of them. Everybody has to offer the wideband to be able to get it. It seems like there's something missing there, and you cannot differentiate that.
But remember, there's differences based on architectural. So maybe wideband CDMA may be common. However, not everyone's jumping on the IMS bandwagon. Some are doing Volga, which is more, release 99 type features. Mm-hmm. So you may not get SIP-based video in a Volga environment. But then again, do you want it? So there's going to be some, pros and cons. For example, IPTV. There are SIP-based IPTV deployments. And then there's non-SIP-based IPTV. Some have, more, web-based kind of portals that you interact that are homegrown, and some are, some are quite different. So it depends on the vision of the architecture as well.
Marketing. You can hear a pin drop. Hey, that worked out
Yeah, because it
pretty
was
well for your
fiber optic
company.
end-to-end back in 1980s with Sprint, right?
Sprint, yeah.
Was it really fiber optic end-to-end? I still wonder.
No, last mile has been and still is all copper.
Exactly. So how's it fiber optic end-to-end? That's a question.
We're seeing in our distribution to independent retailers is that buying decisions being driven more by the added value services. So kind of to address the point of, is there value on the voice side by advancing the technology, as well as a differentiating factor is that you see more and more of the carriers advertising their high-end devices to the youth segment. The average user is taking the voice device, and they're, the NV touches and the Storms and the iPhone are very much obviously targeted at the youth segment. But in our retailers, we're finding that it's driven by value-add service. They're coming in going, what does the music, what makes it easier to text, and so while the technologies may level out as they all get to 4G and what have you, the carrier's revenue model for the independent retailers out there is driven more on the value-added services. So their commissions, their profit is shifting from how many minutes are you selling, and are you getting more minutes at a bigger commission or fewer minutes at a smaller commission, to how many add-ons do you have. And it's all about data revenue and the DAPC measurement of how much data they have, whereas historically it's all been about generic ARPU overall.
It's interesting you come from a Verizon business perspective because, IPPBXs historically were sold where it was IP in the campus but ISDN to the core. Mm-hmm. And now we're seeing SIP trunking being sold by carriers like Verizon Business or Quest, where now you have more value-added features like unified communications and things like that. So maybe the same thing will happen with SIP trunking to a phone with value-added services.
Like they added their friends and family thing, not as a pitch, but just an interesting perspective on what they're allowing that they never would have. And you can add 5 numbers. They're allowing 800 numbers to your point of international calling, and so they're losing that traffic, but they're gaining the loyalty, they're gaining the referrals because I can use my calling card, I can use my Valorant numbers or whatever, but they're letting that happen. They get to capture the users and the market share.
Do you think they'll continue to let that happen, or they'll open it up more and more just to be a generic IP platform and anybody can?
Yeah, they're going to open architecture soon.
Well, but you need services to sell, it sounds like. I mean, you can't just say, hey, here's a box with an application platform for you to download all your apps. You're going to be there selling services along with
I think if you open
the
it up,
device, right?
then you encourage app developers to just like they have with the iPhone.
Should be open, but hey, if you can get them right up front and they already have their their messaging, their multimedia messaging, video calling, if it's all there. Yeah.
Well, isn't that one of the things where Verizon has stated that in LTE it is going to be open, but you're going to have certification labs to certify and probably a revenue share model with those app developers so that you don't just become a bit pipe in that case?
Yeah, the Android platform will be out start of November. We'll start to open it up and look much more like the app stores and stuff that the iPhone has. And then the question we get all the time is, when's the iPhone coming? LTE hits, and they're already testing that in certain markets now.
Cool. Any other questions?
And some of the trends also, what we are seeing, like the femtos and all, are gonna, enable LTE because, when we talk about LTE, I mean, we talked about the driver's data, and in Europe, for example, the spectrum requirements are very high, and there is a lot of degradation on the signal in building penetration and all that. And there is a pretty sizable femto deployment started that's been enabling, the data requirements. And, it's almost the same infrastructure helps to migrate the existing voice to the next generation data networks.
In fact,
that's why we talked about Volga. I mean, it's one of the solutions. It's not the only solution. And I look at it as an interim solution is not a good term because when we do networks, interim solution is 10 to 12 to 15 years. You can't just put a 200,000 worth of an gear of security gateway and all that and rip it apart a year later. It's obsolete. But I think there are some enabling things happening on bringing broadband solutions to the end user, which there's quite a bit of demand. And it's not only small, medium enterprise, it's consumer. Consumer is driving that.
Well, that brings up a good point. I think we also had the question about the backhaul being a huge lurking problem for LTE, but the femto, where the subscriber pays for the backhaul.
Well, that's the thing. That's what I was thinking. I don't know if it's truly enabling the operator to deliver LTE unless they happen to also have backhaul into that same facility. On the other hand, certainly it's very complementary and it can improve the user experience. Right?
Yep.
We have a panel tomorrow on femtocells as well. So.
Because even there we have the same protocol debate. They standardized on this IUH protocol, which is more of a resource layer, TR69 as the remote management of the femto, but you could do UMA, you could do maybe down the road Volga, maybe down the road you do SIP-based or IMS-based controls. So there's still that debate about the protocol itself.
Yeah, but I think they have the time to market issue because it is, it's a new entity now that can improve the user experience today. It's not that maybe slightly differentiated quality of voice or maybe that new app. This is something that it's certainly in my residence made or break. It would make or break my use of the service. So I think there's time to market issues with femto that drive it in different directions.
Or does it make sense to have one if you can do VoIP over Wi-Fi and you have an access point that does Wi-Fi? Would you need a femto then?
Yeah, it depends on your handset.
Yeah.
It depends on the handset, yeah.
But there are different ways of using the femto. I mean, T-Mobile US has been deploying it beautifully using the landlines, the broadband service.
Yeah, with Wi-Fi.
But I think an operator that chose UMA may also realize that it's more expensive to make a choice in legacy technology, that could be otherwise delivered using a lower cost, say, newer technology, and maybe even moving in directions to rectify that, to decrease the cost of the endpoint. They didn't end up with ubiquitous UMA endpoints, and that was an issue. And there will be ubiquitous IP-enabled endpoints. Okay.
Great. How are we doing for time?
We're fine.
Great.
We're all done here. We can wrap up.
Okay. Is there any other questions?
Join me with thanking our speakers today.